here it goes. Okay, let's quickly start with just a little review problem though, because I want to make sure that we're all ready for this big giant problem that's going to be a test question for sure. We're going to write the equation of the circle whose diameter, so you might need to do this on another sheet of paper, has endpoints, oh, let's say 5, -2, and 7.
Is this a random one?
This is just a random problem for extra practice because we did this one yesterday, and I told you yesterday that this was a guaranteed test question. Does anybody remember me saying that?
Yes.
Yeah. So we're just practicing another one because this does incorporate a lot of skills. So here we go. Here's my circle. Here's a diameter. Here are my points. Now, your job is to write the equation of the circle. So, do you remember that the equation of a circle has an x squared quantity, a y squared quantity, added together, and then they equal a number, which is r squared? So, if you're going to do this problem, you have to have in your head that this is what you're looking for. This kind of equation is what we're looking for. Wyatt, where's your lanyard?
I need to go get one.
Yeah, okay, head down there quickly. So we don't stand a chance on this problem if we can't remember this format. So make sure you know that's a circle. That's what you're shooting for. Now, I gotta put some numbers in here. Where do these numbers come from? What do these numbers represent here in the parentheses? They are the center of the circle?
Yeah.
Isn't that gonna be your center? So this is your center. So I need to figure out what that point is so I can put those numbers in here. All right, so how am I gonna figure out the center of the circle?
Don't you subtract, like, you subtract 5 and 7 and then -2 and 8.
Okay, now be careful. I definitely am doing something with the 5 and the 7. Those go together, they're x's. And I'm doing something with the -2 and 8, they go together. But I'm not subtracting them. What am I doing?
What did you use the distance formula for?
Not for that center point. That center point, I'm going to
Add them and then divide by 2.
average, add them and divide by 2. The midpoint is the average, okay? The midpoint is the average, so that's an addition. Distance, when I do distance, that's gonna be a difference, that's gonna be a subtraction. But, guys, we gotta remember midpoint is average, average, average. So, always do the x's together and the y's together. So 5 and 7 makes 12. Divided by 2 is 6. So to get this point, I'm doing 5 plus 7 divided by 2. So I'm getting 6. And then I'm going to do -2 plus 8 divided by 2. And that's going to give me 3.
Yeah.
So when I write it in my equation though, remember it's the opposite. So it's going to be x minus 6, y minus 3. Remember that? It's the opposite. Okay? Now, this number right here is the radius squared. So whatever my radius turns out to be 5, I'm going to put 25. Would everybody agree that this right here is the radius? So I need to find that distance. I'm going to call it R. You can call it D if you want distance. And that's going to be a radical, right? Now, distance is a difference. Distance we subtract. So we're gonna do 7 minus 5 and 8 minus -2. Is that okay with everybody? So what's 7 minus 5? 2 squared is 4. What's 8 minus -2? 10 squared is 100. So my radius is the square root of 104. Now, that breaks down, but you don't have to, because we don't want to know what the radius is. We don't care. We need to put r squared into my equation. What happened? This is r. What happens when I square that?
It gets canceled out.
It just becomes 104, and that's the number that goes right here. All right, now, some of you are struggling a little bit with that, and I know you're thinking, oh, Ms. Ford, there's so much to remember. I know, but it is what it is. So we're going to have to practice, right? So you might want to go home sometime, study hall, after school, I don't care, English class, no, I didn't really say that. Sometime, write down this problem and try to get on your own. Make sure you know the steps you have to go through, because you will see that problem again. Okay, now back to our notes. According to my thing, we are in P3 and we're ready for 4C. Does that match up with what you have? All right, so we've got 4. All right, so tell me what you think we ought to do first. Distribute, absolutely. So we're just going to distribute twice. So 4 minus 4x plus 5 plus 5x, and then greater than 3x minus 1. Is that okay? Okay, so now what? Louis, what do you think we ought to do now?
Combine like terms.
You gotta add the 4 and the 5, and then 5x minus the 4x.
Yeah, so we call it collecting like terms. I heard somebody say that. So we're gonna have a 9 plus x. Is that okay with everybody? All right, Deshaun, now what do you wanna do?
Like terms,
Say it, tell me what to do here.
the 3x and the x.
So we can't really add these two together because they're on the opposite side of our symbol, but we do need to put them together, right? We do need to get them together, but we'll have to do what? Subtract something. I don't know which way you want to go. You want to subtract x or subtract 3x?
3x.
What?
3x.
3x? So we have 9 minus 2x is greater than -1. And since you did that, then you really probably are going to subtract 9. So -2x is greater than -10. Oops, here comes the tricky part. We're going to divide by -2,
So
but that means I have to
Flip the sign.
flip my sign. So I'm going to end up with x is less than 5.
Yeah.
We're big kids now though, so we're not going to write our answer that way. We're going to write our answer as an interval. That means the parentheses and bracket thing. So I do a picture of this. You don't have to, but it always helps me if I draw a picture of it. because I know that this arrow, this is x is less than 5, this arrow represents negative infinity. This side is negative infinity. So when I write my interval, it's negative infinity, comma 5.
If you did it the other way and got 10 is greater than 2x, I subtracted the x to 3x, and I had a positive term because I thought I was doing it easier. Then where do I flip the sign if that's,
You don't flip the sign
I don't.
because you didn't divide by a negative. But when you go to graph this, you gotta make sure you're graphing it right. See, this is backwards of how we normally look at it. It isn't wrong, but this can get confusing. This says the same thing. Doesn't that say x is less than 5? Yeah, you're gonna get the same answer either way. You just gotta make sure that you're graphing the right part of the number line so that your interval is correct. When it's an equals, Tilly, I'm with you. I do have this thing, I like to have my variable first, but when it's an inequality, I really like to have my variable first, even if it means I'm gonna get a negative, because I just think it makes it easier in the end. But it's okay. This is absolutely fine, but you gotta write your answer this way. Okay, what about D? D has a fraction in it. What do you think we're gonna do with that one? Don't make it hard, guys. Do what makes sense to you.
We multiply the 5 first.
Multiply by 5? Does that make sense to everybody, that we would times both sides by 5? So if we did that, remember, if you times this side by 5, you're just gonna have 3x minus 2. The 5's gone. But now over here, you're gonna have greater than negative 5. Now what?
Add the 2.
Add the 2. So plus 2. And divide by 3. Now somebody in the room is gonna get wild and wacky and switch that sign because they see a negative in there. But remember, we only switch the sign if the number we divide by is negative. We divided by 3, didn't we? So sign isn't gonna change. Again, gotta write it as an interval. So this means this. This time I'm arrowing this way, so I'm using positive infinity. So my answer is negative 1, positive infinity. This is Ford. How come sometimes you put the infinity first and sometimes you put it last? It depends what it looks like on the number line. If you're using negative infinity, if you arrow this way, what you always write negative infinity, comma your number. But if you're doing this infinity, it's gonna be the number, comma infinity, because they have to go in order. All right, this one's a mess. What do you think about that?
Don't you find common denominators?
You could change the whole shebang into what denominator would I use? 6. Keep in mind, this one has a denominator. You cannot ignore the 1. So this one is gonna get times by 3. And this one by 2. And this one by 6. Agreed? Now, all the denominators match, so we can drop them out and do my distributive. Let me know if something I'm doing has you perplexed. We got our common denominator as you suggested. I think that's the easiest way. The teachers did that last year, it's great. And then I distributed the things I multiplied by, and now I'm here. Daryl, you got any thoughts?
We combine my terms.
Mm-hmm. So these two are gonna make a 7x. And these are gonna make a minus, oh no, excuse me, plus 5?
Yes.
And I still got my minus 6.
This is for,
Mm-hmm.
so you don't wanna make the negative 6. It's okay if the negative 6 is negative and the other 6s aren't, for the denominator.
Okay, no, the denominators are all 6. They have to match exactly. This number is negative 6 over 6. So the denominator is 6.
Oh, okay.
The numerator is negative 6, but that doesn't really matter.
Okay.
That's just the number that I put down here. Okay? That number over there, Aubrey, was negative 1 over 1. That's gonna be positive. All right, what happens when I subtract 5? What do I get over here? Negative 11. And then I'll divide by 7. Am I gonna switch my sign? Whoops. Okay,
If one of the denominators was a negative, but
move the negative to the top.
okay.
Okay, so if you have, remember, 3 over negative 4 is the same as negative 3 over 4. So don't even mess with it, just move it to the numerator. Am I switching the sign or not? No, because I divided by 7. All right, did you already write that as an interval?
Not yet.
Okay, do it. We need to write that as an interval. All of our answers are gonna be written as intervals unless we're told otherwise. This is called an inequality. We're gonna write it as an interval, so tell me what you got there.
Negative 11 over 7, comma, infinity.
I hear some nods, I hear some shakes.
Would be negative infinity, comma,
Yeah.
negative 11.
Remember, Sloan, okay, did I get your name right?
Yeah.
Your last name.
It's
but not your
okay.
First name. Normally, I wouldn't call you Sloan, I call you Miss Sloan. Here is negative 11/7, so on the number line, where am I shading that? That way. And when I shade this way, which infinity is involved? Negative infinity. So this isn't right. We're gonna do negative infinity, negative 11/7. You guys, you don't have to draw a number line, but if you're at all confused, draw a number line, because as soon as you sketch your answer, you're gonna know you're gonna visually see which infinity you need to put into your equation, or into your answer.
And infinity always has questions. No matter what.
Infinity is always open, always open. This one's open because of the symbol in the problem, but infinity is always open regardless. All right, F is a monster. So let's see if we can fight our way through problem F. All right. You're walking down the hall, you find this problem. You do not get to go home until you solve this problem. All right, so you're not just gonna sit there and stare at it, you're gonna jump in and do something. What kind of makes sense to be the first thing that we would jump in and do when I see this?
Distribute.
Distribute. Does that not kind of just pop out at you? When I see a number in a parentheses, I can't stop myself. I want to distribute. So, I know they're fractions. We'll take care of that in a minute, but right now we're going to distribute. So we have let's not get confused. 1/2 times x over 1 is gonna be x over 2. Okay, guys, look. 1 over 2 times x over 1 is gonna be x over 2. Plus, what am I gonna get here? 3 over 2. This one's easy. Now I'm gonna do the same thing. So this one's gonna be x over 3 minus, oh, what does that work out to be? When I take 1/3 times negative 3 over 1, what do I get? Don't I get negative 3 over 3, which is just negative 1? Now, are there like terms to combine over here? Are there like terms to combine over here? But they involve fractions. I can do that. But could we just get rid of the fractions now at this point? Could we get a common denominator for all of our fractions? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What would be the common denominator for 2, 2, 1, 1, 3, and 1? What's the number? 6. So we're going to multiply this one by 3, this one by 3, this one by 6, and 6, and 2, and 6. All right, let me stop there. Let's catch up. It's kind of a mess. But remember, at this point, can we drop all the denominators? Are they all the same now? So that's going to simplify a lot. So here I'm going to have just 3x. Here I'm going to have plus 9, right? Here I'm going to have plus 12x. Minus 48, remember the denominators are gone, so I'm just doing what I'm doing in the numerator. 2x and 6. Now it's still big, but at least it's easier now because there's no more fractions to work with. Do I have to get rid of the fractions? No. But it makes my life easier usually. Okay, so 3 and 12, I'm gonna start combining now. 3 and 12 is gonna make 15. And a positive 9 and a negative 48. Negative 39. We're bothered by that. We can get our calculators. It's okay. I hope we can do that without a calculator, but if we can't, we can't. All right, now what? Let's move that 2x over. So that's going to give me a 13x. Add 39 over. So now I have 13x. Is less than what? What's negative 6 plus 39? 33. And I'm going to divide. I do not get a very pleasant answer, but that's okay. I got 33 over 13. Okay, write your interval. Think about what this looks like on the number line and write your interval. Jared, what you got? What's your interval?
Negative infinity, and then 33, 13.
What do the rest of you think? Thumbs up? Perfect. Because when I graph this, Izzy, when I graph this, it's going that way, right? And that way is negative infinity. Perfect. All right, P3, due Friday. due Friday.
And then isn't P2 due Thursday? Or no?
I can't remember.
Sorry, never mind.
Yeah, let's see, this is period alpha. Yes, P2 is due tomorrow.
Okay.
Isn't today Wednesday?
Yep.
It's so confusing. All right, here we go. Find the slope of the line through these 2 points. Find the slope of the line through these 2 points. Well, I'm gonna use M as my slope letter. Do you remember that from before, like equals mx plus b? That's, I'm not sure why, Google it, I'm sure there's a reason. But M is the letter we use for slope. Anybody remember how to find slope? Yes, Lucy.
Is it y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1?
It is. Slope is the change in y over the change in x. We call it rise over run sometimes. Have you ever heard that? Rise over run. So change in y, how do your y's change, and how do your x's change? Now, oh my gosh, these are brand new markers and they're just terrible. Okay. All right, so it doesn't matter which point is your 1's and your 2's. So I can call this x1, y1, this can be x2, y2. It doesn't matter which one is which. But when we do slope, it matters that we're going in the same direction. So we're gonna take, if I do it this way, it's gonna be 8 minus 2 over 6 minus negative 1. So my slope is going to be what? 6 over 7. Now, I told you it didn't matter. I want to show that to you, make sure you get it. If I did it the other way, this was 0.2 and this was 0.1, then I would do 2 minus 8 over negative 1 minus 6. Now, you see what's going to happen? I'm going to get negative 6 over negative 7. Is that the same slope? Isn't that 6/7? So it doesn't matter which direction you go. 2 minus 1, 1 minus 2. It doesn't matter as long as you go the same way with both letters. All right, would you go ahead and find the slope for B? Josh, what'd you get?
I got negative 9 over 9.
Which is, let's reduce that.
Oh,
What-
my bad. So like 3 over 3?
Okay, go more.
Oh, more. Okay, 1. Negative 1 over 1.
And negative 1 over 1 is just negative 1?
Negative 1. Yeah.
Did everybody get negative 1? Perfect. All right. Look at number 2. I got 2 points, but I only know part of one of them. And I know that the slope is 3/4. So guess what we're supposed to figure out? What's that?
The missing one.
I'm missing one. Yep, that missing one is the one I'm gonna figure out what that X is. All right, who's got a plan on that? Leslie, you got an idea?
We use the, do we use the equation we use for the one?
Okay, what would that look like? Yep.
So it'd be like, 5 minus 6 over, 4 minus x equals, 3 over 4.
Yes! Beautiful! That's exactly right. We know what m is. So we're gonna take y minus y, x minus x, and get 3/4. That is great. Now we need to solve that though. So what do you think we ought to do now?
Can we do 5 minus 6?
We can do 5 minus 6, so that would be -1. Can't do anything with this really. Okay, so that looks good. Okay, that's a good starting point. You've seen things like this before. Do you remember how to solve those?
Can we find the GCS?
Actually you could, but that's gonna be messy because of this. But you could find the greatest or the least common denominator.
Do we
Cross multiply. This is, I know it looks a little weird, but it's like when you had something like this, didn't you do 8x equals 10? Do this cross multiply thing? This is exactly the same thing, it's just got a little bit bigger denominator there. So we're gonna cross multiply. This is called a proportion. It's a fraction equal to a fraction, and we're gonna cross multiply. So -4 equals 3 times 4 minus x. So 4 times -1, I just did that in my head, got -4, and then 3 times 4 minus x. So this is a distributive. Now we just solve like regular, so we'll subtract 12. And divide by -3. So I got 16 over 3. Anybody have a question about that? Good? Following all that? Okay, then you're gonna try B. Work it out, consult your neighbor if you need help. But let's get problem B sorted out.
Cross multiply the 2/3 and the 1/2. Cross multiply the 1/2.
Alright.
Can I not
The
do
what-
-2 minus 5?
Could you simplify it down?
Was -3 over 2. You're always like more tired in the moment, but then you feel better the next day. You got more sleep. No, it's been like whenever I sleep longer, I just feel better.
Did you try that?
I feel like I'm sleeping.
I got it. And my baby gets it.
You do? I really don't want to, but I like have to. But yours, did you get the negative for? No, it's not it, and like, they're the people that have. I'm just not everything.
Oh, did I get the negative?
But then
No.
I
Oh, so you go, right?
10 over 3.
Get you this thing real okay. Forget it.
All right, who thinks you got something?
No. I posted about how I quit. Yeah, I did. When there was a shooting again, I posted that I wasn't going back.
All right, I got -2/3. Anybody else get that? I'm not seeing rousing agreement, so do I have a mistake?
Oh,
I
I
got
got
a
a negative
-2.
two.
Yeah, we did it already.
Which was, I know one.
You know what you did
We're
wrong?
on the last step.
We're all good now?
Wait,
Listen, I make mistakes too, so don't just agree with me.
no, I thought it was negative 3 over 2.
Now, sometimes, this kind of goes back to what someone was talking about earlier. Sometimes we're not sure what to do with that negative, when it said -2/3. You have to put it somewhere, so you either put it on the top or you put it on the bottom. It's one or the other, not both. So I always put mine on the top. So I cross multiply -2 times -2. If you put yours on the bottom down here, that would be fine, but then that's a -3 times that, and yours is gonna look a little bit different than mine.
How do you know like when you can do cross multiplication with the equal sign? Like, because remember there'll be some times where you like won't be able to multiply when two.
The only time you can't, anytime you have a proportion, which is a fraction equal to a fraction,
Okay.
you can cross multiply, anytime. If you've got something like this, then obviously we can't cross multiply because we don't have a fraction equal to a fraction. This is cross multipliable. This is not cross multipliable, but anytime, no matter how ugly it is, if it's a fraction equal to a fraction, you can cross multiply. Okay? You all right with that? Okay, I want to pause in our notes for a second. Don't put them away, just set them aside and get out a sheet of paper.
Don't worry, I got. Oh, you got it.
We need to have a quiz. We haven't had any assessments that were in school for a week, so we are gonna have a quiz. Now, the quiz we take, I promise, Mignon, I promise, the problems on the quiz are going to be exactly like the ones we're getting ready to practice. So if you want to do well on the quiz, what are you going to do? Practice these. Yep, we're going to go through them together, but then you might want to practice them again if there's any that you're not sure about. So, one question on the quiz. They may be in a different order, but this will be a question on the quiz. I'm going to give you 2 points. I'm going to ask you to find the midpoint. I'm going to ask you to find the distance. This means distance. I'm not going to tell you that's what it means. I'm telling you now. You're supposed to know. This means distance. Okay? So here we go. How do we find midpoint? Average. So I'm going to look at my 2 points, and I'm going to average my x's. Remember, don't mix and match. It's x and x always. So 1 and 4 divided by 2, and 3 and -5 divided by 2. Average means add and divide by 2. Add and divide by 2. Leslie, do you need to move up here? You can see okay? Okay. All right, so what have we got then? 1 plus 4 is? Divided by 2, 5 halves. 3 plus -5 is? -2 divided by 2 is -1. Does anybody have a question about that? Midpoint. All right, distance. There's no formula sheet for this, folks. You gotta know how to find distance. Distance, remember, is the big radical. What do we do under the radical? We subtract our x's. So we subtract our x's. So 4 minus 1, and we're gonna square that. So subtract your x's. Either 1 minus 4 or 4 minus 1, it doesn't matter, don't get all hung up. Just subtract them. We're gonna square that. Now subtract your y's. So that'll be negative 5 minus 3. All right, do the math. What's 4 minus 1? 3 squared is 9. What's negative 5 minus 3? Negative 8. Squared is positive 64. Add them together, what do we get? The square root of 73. Now we are lucky, 73 is prime. So it's not breaking down, we're done with this one. Now, there's different versions of the quiz. So somebody will get something like root 73, but somebody else might get root 72. So then we break that down. 72 is, I always start with 2 when it's an even number, but you don't have to. You can break it down any way you want. But it's 2 times 36. Is 36 a perfect square? Yeah. So what's the square root of 36? Isn't this gonna be 6, 6, and there's a double 6 right there?
Yeah.
So this is gonna be 6 root 2. But our answer originally was just the square root of 73. That one's done.
So if it's prime, we leave it as prime and a square root. If we can break it down, or if it does come out with it being
Absolutely.
even, then we can.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right, next question. We talked about this a lot today. I'm gonna draw a picture. You're gonna have a picture. Don't know what the picture's gonna look like. This is an example of a picture. And it's going to say, write this as an interval. Write this as an interval. All right, so what interval is that? Negative infinity to 5. All right, somebody else's quiz might say, here's an interval. Draw a picture of it. What would the picture look like for that interval?
The 4 would be the middle, and the arrow would be
A
going to the
dot
right.
at 4, open,
And then the arrow going to the
and
right.
the arrow going to the right. So for the quiz tomorrow, you need to be able to take a picture and write an interval, or take an interval and draw a picture. Okay? All right, now we're going to simplify an exponent problem. So we have 3x to the 4th, y to the negative 3rd, over 9x squared, y to the 10th, and we're going to simplify that. Okay, so I have a fraction. Let's just do it a piece at a time. Wait a minute, first I see a negative in there, and I do not like negative exponents. So Lisa Ford is going to move that negative. That's my particular strategy. You don't have to do it, but I would suggest you move that negative. So everything's gonna stay right where it's at, except the y to the 3rd is coming down. right, now I'm gonna start cleaning things up. So I'm gonna start with my numbers. What happens with 3/9? Those are not exponents. Those are numbers. You have the fraction, 3/9. What does that reduce to? 1/3. 3/9, 1/3. Now look at your x's. They're on top of each other, which means some of them are going to cancel. Right? You have 4 of them on top of 2 of them. What's going to happen? You're going to become x squared, and where's that x squared going to be? On the top. That's where the extras are. Now, these are not going to cancel because they are on the same level. They're next to each other. So you're going to total those up. You got 10 of them and 3 of them altogether. You got 13 of them. Now, this one, as it turns out, doesn't need to be there. It isn't wrong. So if it makes sense to you to put it there, put it there. Looks a little confusing to me sometimes with a random one in there. Doesn't matter. That's your answer. Okay? All right, 2 more. We're gonna do a little absolute value. What do you think I'm looking at right here? Last year's quiz, right? I'm gonna write a new one. It's gonna look just like this one. I'm actually gonna write 3 of them probably. It's gonna look just like this. Same problems. All right, here we go. Figure that out real quick. What do you think? Anybody have an answer yet you're willing to share?
-4.
I heard a -4. Did I hear 2 -4s? Do I hear anything else? We all think it's -4. 3 minus 4 is -1, but it's an absolute value, so it's 1. The absolute value of -5 is 5, and 1 minus 5 is -4. Very good. Last question. Last question. What is this the equation of?
A circle.
A circle. Remember, what do circles look like? An x squared plus a y squared equal to an r squared, right? A number. This number is always r squared. So your job is going to be to tell me the center and the radius. That's your job. What's the center? What's the radius?
The center would be 4, -1.
The center, according to Kate, is 4, -1. Take a look at that equation. Think about what we have learned. Would you agree that it's 4, -1? How about radius? Yeah, I gave you a huge hint here, kids, when I said this number is always r squared. So if r squared is 18, then isn't r going to be the square root of 18? Okay, now here's the deal. Anytime you have a radical, just like that problem we did earlier, you have to ask yourself, can I simplify that radical? So 18 is 2 times 9. And 9's a perfect square. 9 is 3 times 3. So isn't this really 3 square roots of 2? Now, if you put root 18, you're getting partial credit because you got the right number. But to get full credit, you have to simplify it. Okay? Now, I don't want anybody worrying about this quiz. I want you preparing for it because you know exactly what I'm going to ask you, right? The questions we just did on your piece of paper right there, those are the questions on the quiz. Those are the concepts you need to know on the quiz, right?
So when you're simplifying a radical, the number that pops up the most is the one that goes on the outside and
It
then
has to pop up twice,
twice, yeah.
twice.
And then,
Anything that pops up twice goes on the outside.
okay.
When you're square rooting, square means two, square root. So if you have two of something that can come out, the other one stays in. Okay? All right, I had to leave your notes out. I was hoping we'd get one more problem done. We're gonna do one more problem. Problem 3A. Looks like I had some trouble writing that, so it's not very nicely done. But we're gonna do problem 3A, which says I've got 2 points, negative 2 and 12, and 6 and 4. And we're gonna write the point slope form of the line. Okay. How many of you remember those words? Point slope form of the line. Okay. Josh, do you remember what it is?
I'm thinking no, but it sounds familiar.
It sounds familiar. That's good. That's good. Anybody remember what the point slope form looks like? Okay, well, let's write this down. Point slope form says y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Now, does it look familiar? And m is, of course, the slope. And the x1 and y1 are your point. Okay, this is called point slope because you're gonna plug in a slope and you're gonna plug in a point. Okay, so the x1, y1 are your point, and this is your slope. So what do you think is gonna be the first thing we're gonna have to do? Find the slope. We know how to do that, we've already practiced it. 4 minus 12, always y minus y, x minus x. So, 4 minus 12. Did you get negative 1 again? Seems like we just got that answer. Did you get negative 1?
Yeah.
Now, pick a point. It doesn't matter which one. Let's all use the same one. Which one do you want to use? The first one or the second one? Second one? I like that one too. No negatives there. So we use that point. It doesn't make a difference. Does everybody hear me? Pick a point. Doesn't matter. We pick that one. So now, y minus the y coordinate. This is your x1, y1 right here. The point you pick is your x1, y1. So y minus 4 equals negative 1 x minus 6. And the joyful good news is you're done because the direction said use the point slope form. So we're done. This is the point slope form. You don't have to do a darn thing. You are done right here.
So we just have to show the thing, we don't have to solve.
Okay, this is the answer. Yeah, there's no solving to do if we do a point slope. Okay, so we'll pick up there next time. And you can get your phones, but you cannot line up at the door.